The sound of crystal glasses clinking and soft piano music floated through the bright, sunlit restaurant, but at table 17, the air felt heavier than the rest of the room. It wasn't just tension, it was the quiet kind of cruelty that doesn't raise voices, yet cuts deeper than any shout. A woman in a striking red dress sat upright, her expression calm but cold, her lips curling ever so slightly as she spoke in a language no one around her seemed to understand. Across from her stood a waiter, tired eyes, steady hands, and a heart carrying more weight than anyone could see. What happened next would change everything. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of good people, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House. Your support helps bring more meaningful stories like this to life. Armin Qureshi had learned long ago how to stand still even when the world pushed hard against him. At 34, life had already tested him more than most. His days began before sunrise, waking his 6-year-old daughter Meher, braiding her hair with clumsy fingers, and walking her to school before rushing to his shift at the upscale restaurant in the city's busiest district. It wasn't the life he had imagined, but it was the life he held together with quiet determination. The restaurant itself was a world far removed from his own. Sunlight poured through tall glass windows, reflecting off polished marble floors and gold-trimmed furniture. Wealth moved through the room effortlessly, designer dresses, expensive watches, laughter that never seemed forced. Armin moved among them like a shadow, polite, efficient, invisible when needed. But invisibility had its own cost. That afternoon, the lunch crowd was steady but manageable. Armin had just finished serving a family when the hostess guided a new guest to table 17. The moment she entered, conversation subtly shifted. She carried herself with the kind of confidence that didn't ask for attention, it demanded it. Her name was Serafina Volkov. She was known in certain circles, wealthy, influential, and not particularly kind. Her blonde hair fell perfectly over her shoulders, and her red dress contrasted sharply with the soft tones of the restaurant. Everything about her was precise, controlled, and intimidating. Armin approached her table with his usual calm demeanor, menu in hand, posture straight. He greeted her politely, his voice steady despite the exhaustion lingering beneath it. Serafina barely looked at him at first. Instead, she adjusted her glass, glanced around, and then finally fixed her gaze on him. That was when it began. She spoke, not in the local language, but in fluent French. Her tone was deliberate, her words quick and sharp, as if testing him. It wasn't just ordering food. It was something else. Something layered with intention. Armin didn't react. He simply nodded once, as if he had understood, and calmly repeated the order back to her, in French. The shift in her expression was immediate. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, her lips tightening. It wasn't shock alone, it was discomfort. The power she thought she held in that moment slipped quietly through her fingers. But she wasn't finished. She leaned back in her chair and continued speaking in French, this time more complex, more rapid. There was a hint of mockery now, subtle but unmistakable. She asked about ingredients, preparation, wine pairings, but beneath it all was a silent challenge. She was testing him, trying to expose a weakness. Armin stood there, hands gently clasped, his face composed. And then he answered again. Fluent. Precise. Effortless. Not only did he respond to every question, but he added thoughtful recommendations, explained the origins of the dishes, and even corrected a minor misconception she had about a particular wine region, all in the same language she had chosen to isolate him. For the first time, Serafina looked uncertain. The surrounding tables had begun to notice. Not because of loud voices or dramatic gestures, but because something rare was unfolding, a quiet reversal of roles. Armin wasn't just a waiter in that moment. He was something more. But what no one in that room knew was the story behind his calm. Years ago, Armin had been a student of languages. He had dreamed of becoming a translator, maybe even working abroad. He loved words, the way they connected worlds, the way they carried meaning beyond borders. But life had shifted abruptly when his wife fell ill. Medical bills piled up, responsibilities grew, and dreams were quietly folded away to make room for survival. After her passing, everything changed. He became both mother and father to Meher. The books he once studied gathered dust, replaced by overtime shifts and sleepless nights. But he never forgot what he had learned. Languages stayed with him, not as a career, but as a silent part of who he was. Back at table 17, the tension had transformed. Serafina studied him now, not with superiority, but with curiosity. Something about his presence unsettled her, not because he challenged her, but because he didn't. There was no arrogance in him. No need to prove anything. Just quiet dignity. She switched back to the local language, her voice softer this time. She placed her order again, more simply now, without the earlier edge. Armin nodded and stepped away, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before, but also more honest. As he moved through the restaurant, serving other tables, his mind drifted briefly to Meher. She had a school recital coming up, and he had promised he would attend. Promises mattered to her. They were the small anchors in a world that had already taken too much. When he returned with Serafina's meal, the sunlight had shifted slightly, casting softer shadows across the room. He placed the dishes carefully, explaining them in a calm, respectful tone. This time, she listened. Truly listened. There was no performance, no hidden agenda. Just a woman sitting across from a man she had misjudged. And for reasons she didn't fully understand, it stayed with her. After finishing her meal, she didn't leave immediately. Instead, she sat quietly for a moment, her fingers resting lightly on the table. When Armin approached with the bill, she looked up at him, not with authority, but with something closer to reflection. She asked him, gently this time, where he had learned French. He answered simply. Life, he said, had given him reasons to learn many things, even if he never had the chance to use them the way he once hoped. There was no bitterness in his voice. Only truth. That answer lingered long after she left the restaurant. Days passed, but the moment refused to fade from Serafina's mind. She had built her world on control, on always being the one who understood more, knew more, held more power. But that afternoon had shown her something she hadn't expected: grace without status, intelligence without recognition, strength without display. It unsettled her. And slowly, it began to change her. Meanwhile, Armin returned to his routine. Early mornings, long shifts, quiet evenings helping Meher with her homework. Life moved forward, steady and unremarkable, just the way he had learned to manage it. Until one afternoon, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at the restaurant, addressed to him. It wasn't official looking. No company logo, no formal seal. Just his name written neatly across the front. Inside, there was a short note. Serafina had written it. She didn't apologize directly, but her words carried weight. She spoke about assumptions, about how easy it was to misjudge someone based on their position. She mentioned how his quiet confidence had stayed with her, how it had forced her to reflect on herself in ways she hadn't before. And then she offered something unexpected. A scholarship. Not for charity, not as pity, but as recognition. She had connections with a cultural institute that offered advanced language certification programs. She had arranged for him to have a chance, to study again, to rebuild something he had once lost. Armin read the letter more than once. Not because he doubted it, but because he didn't know how to feel. For so long, life had been about surviving. Dreams had become something distant, almost irrelevant. But now, something small and fragile stirred again inside him. Hope. That evening, as he sat with Meher, watching her draw pictures at the small kitchen table, he realized something important. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about showing her that life could still change. That even after loss, even after hardship, there could still be new beginnings. He accepted the offer. The journey wasn't easy. Balancing work, studies, and fatherhood tested him in ways he hadn't expected. There were nights he felt like giving up, moments when exhaustion pressed too heavily. But Meher's smile, her belief in him, kept him going. And slowly, things began to shift. Months turned into a year. Arman completed his certification with distinction. Opportunities opened. He began working part-time as a translator, then gradually moved into a full-time role with an international firm. The restaurant became a chapter of his past, not forgotten, but honored. As for Serafina, she never sought recognition for what she had done. But she did change. In small ways at first, listening more, judging less. And over time, those small changes became something meaningful. Because sometimes, transformation doesn't come from grand events. Sometimes, it comes from a single moment of humility. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness and respect can change lives. And before we end, tell us in the comments, have you ever been underestimated, and how did you rise above it? Because in the end, it wasn't just about a wealthy woman or a struggling waiter. It was about something deeper. The quiet power of dignity. The strength of perseverance. And the reminder that no matter where someone stands in life, their worth is never defined by how others see them, but by who they choose to be when it matters most.